It took me 4 attempts and numerous month-long breaks to finish Gundam Seed. Now, this isn't to say it was due to the show being bad, despite what the title of this video may imply, but rather due to the fact it was so goddamn slow. The first 20 episodes are a real slog, with the pacing all over the place. However, having said that, I actually wish I never finished the series for a rather odd reason. It would still have my respect. Before Kira sets foot in the Freedom, Seed is little more than a mediocre series with bad mobile suit and character design. It doesn't stand out, there's far too much melodrama, and the writing is generally poor all around. However, it is perfectly serviceable. A poor man's one-year war, if you will. However, after Kira sets foot in the Freedom, Seed's quality takes a nosedive as it not only becomes sanctimonious drivel, but actively works to undermine its anti-war message. It sets out to do what the original Mobile Suit Gundam did decades previously, but ultimately fails as it misses the point entirely. Generally, I try to judge Gundam's alternate universes on their own merit, since they usually do their own thing. There's a reason I like IBO, despite the show being radically different from other entries in the franchise. Seed, however, is the exception to this stance because its plot and characters very clearly draw heavily from the original Mobile Suit Gundam, if they're not copied entirely. So, before being aggressively negative throughout the rest of the video, I want to touch on a few things I actually liked about Seed. The first is Athrun. Overall, he's just a solid character. Sensible motivation, realistic development and change, all around he's just fun to watch. If Athrun was the protagonist proper, I'd have probably enjoyed Seed a hell of a lot more than I had. In a similar vein to that, I loved Mulaflaga. He's like the love child of Slegger and Quattro that took more after the former than the latter. Every time he played a prominent role in an episode, be it acting as a mentor or fighting on the front lines, things got entertaining. Right up until the end, the man was a total badass, and it's only fitting he went out like one as well. You know, keeping Mu's death in mind, I'm really thankful Seed didn't undo this legitimately great moment, since it shows off both the heroism and tragedy that comes with the sacrifices made during times of war. Would be a real big shame and rather tone-deaf if the series or its sequel backpedaled on this like it did with other characters. Mu should have been in a better series. As my thinly veiled sarcasm alludes to, it's hard to talk about the good in Seed without mentioning the bad. At every turn, this series introduces interesting ideas which either go nowhere, get dropped entirely, or are botched to the point of incoherence. To exemplify what I'm trying to get at, we need to look no further than Flay Ulster. Now, I'll admit I'm a bit of a weirdo. Other than Mu, Flay was my favorite character in the earliest parts of Seed because she was a character. She may have been a venomous, vindictive bitch. However, I could understand why she acted as she did. The girl had personality, albeit an awful one. However, whenever she was on screen, things actually happened. As her name would imply, Flay was a bizarro Frau or Fa. She sunk her claws into Kira, began tearing away at who he was, and sparked a grotesque, if not downright abusive relationship with the series' protagonist. When I saw this for the first time, I was taken aback. It was something I just wasn't prepared for. It was a unique spin on a more traditional aspect of Gundam. I wanted to see where the shake-up would take the series. The problem, however, like a lot of other ideas in Seed, is that this relationship goes nowhere. It has no real bearing on the plot outside of its initial introduction and is forgotten about as Flay is written out of the show. With Flay, the ideas associated with her don't work to actively hurt the series' message. War is bad, but rather squanders potential for interesting storytelling. As far as blunders go, it's not all that important. However, Seed has a nasty habit of shooting itself in the foot for no real rhyme or reason. Case in point being Andrew Waltfeld, the Desert Tiger, otherwise known as Seed's Rambaral. Other than being two older men with classy lovers that have the respect of their subordinates, who are also fighting in a desert, both Walfield and Rawl narratively serve the same function: humanize the opposition. What makes Ramba Ral stand out from other Mobile Suit Gundam antagonists, and what made him a fan favorite, is the man's sense of honor, his compassion. He appears at just the right moment to force the audience to ask an important question. Is the side our protagonist fighting for the right one? Throughout all of early Mobile Suit Gundam, everyone, excluding Sayla I think, treats Amuro pretty poorly. They force a boy who was neither enlisted nor been conscripted to fight in the Gundam without so much as a thank you. He pushes himself to his breaking point during each engagement. He kills countless people and eventually snaps. Then, after being denied a choice, Amuro accepts his role as a pilot only for the crew of the White Base to get on his case once more. They berate him for his bad attitude, and he eventually gets the bright slap. Fed up, Amuro deserts with the Gundam and encounters Ramba Ral. Though their encounter is brief, the old soldier pays for the boy's meal and treats him with genuine understanding and compassion. Up until this point in the series, everyone, be it the crew of the White Base or the Federation itself, have treated Amuro like dirt. Yet here's Ramba, an enemy, treating a total stranger better than the cast we've all come to know. Though it's a simple act, it calls into question the other antagonists we've encountered so far. Despite being enemies, was Garma really a bad guy? Was Char? With these doubts lingering both in the minds of the audience and our hero, the fight that follows is a bitter one. We don't want to see Amuro die, unless you do, yet the only way he can survive is by taking out Ramba, a genuinely good man. The tragedy that is war has brought these two individuals together and forced them to fight. When the dust settles, there aren't any victors, just survivors. Ramba's death puts into focus that the enemy of the series isn't Zeon, but rather war as a concept. It puts a face to all those that are killed throughout the series and makes it personal, not just for the audience, but for Amuro himself. He has to live with the guilt of killing a man he knew. As I mentioned before, Seed does this almost beat for beat, minus the desertion thing, with Andrew Waltfeld and Kira. Though the crew of the Archangel treats its pilot a hell of a lot better than that of the White Base, which is cool to see, the same basic idea is established with the Desert Tiger. Kira realizes Waltfeld is a good man and doesn't want to kill him. However, the war forces him to do so. Much like Amuro with Ramba, Kira is forced to live with the guilt that he killed a decent individual he knew. Sounds great, doesn't it? Well, here's the issue. Seed, for some godforsaken reason, decided to bring Waltfeld back to life. As in, Kira never killed him, thus nulling everything his death achieves, both for the character and the audience. There's no more tragedy of war, no more face for the fallen faceless, no more guilt, nothing. Kira reaps absolutely no consequences for his actions and doesn't have to confront all that he's done throughout the course of the conflict. This blunder, outside of being wasted story potential since Waltfeld and Kira only have, one interaction, actively hurts Seed's anti-war message. What made Ramba's death great was that it showed the audience why war was bad. It demonstrated that the people in the trenches are exactly that, people. It highlighted the misery of those that survived and the tragedy of those that died. The audience understands the point of the series without a long-winded sermon. Put bluntly, this is Seed's biggest failing, and what turns it into sanctimonious drivel. Instead of giving the actions of its cast actual weight, instead of showing why war is bad, the show opts to throw consequence aside and preach to the audience. Earlier, I said the moment where Kira steps into the freedom is the moment when the show takes a nosedive. The reason for that statement comes down to this right here. Effortlessly, Kira is able to disable every enemy mobile suit that gets in his way without killing a single person. This, in one visual, sums up the problem with Seed's last third in how it misses the point entirely. It makes the task of ending a conflict, a war, simple and without consequence. Seed's biggest sin, so to speak, is how ridiculously evil both Zaft and the Alliance are. Throughout most of the show, Zaft does nothing wrong, and I don't mean that in a joking way, as most would with Zeon. The Alliance blamed them for a terrorist attack, then nuked a colony killing millions. Zaft responded with a weird techno-babble science weapon that prevented nuclear reactions from occurring. Though the following power shortage killed a lot of people, the action was pretty clearly a defensive one since a colony just got nuked. But then, to give Lacus a single leg to stand on, the show decided to turn the entire faction into genocidal maniacs hell-bent on destroying Earth with a superweapon without any real motivation. If Zaft had any actually crazy inclination like Xeon, if they didn't go from 50 to 1000 in an instant, I could possibly buy this. However, that hasn't been present throughout the entire series. In fact, there's an overall lack of motivation for anyone doing what they're doing. The Alliance is straight up insane, as witnessed with the Bloody Valentine tragedy and their decision to declare war after a terrorist attack from a third party, while Blue Cosmos hates coordinators because they're irrational. Instead of having well-crafted reasons for doing what they're doing, instead of making the war a tragedy that got out of hand, factions do awful things because it's convenient for the plot. When it comes to the 1 Year War, the motivation for each faction doing what they're doing is well established and doesn't rely upon plot convenience. Because the government is Earth-centric, the Federation neglects and mistreats space noids, which leads to resentment. Seeing an opportunity, those with ambition capitalize on said resentment, whip the people up into a fervor, and drag the Earth sphere into a catastrophic war. What I'm trying to get at here is that both factions of the 1 Year War had serious grievances with one another before and after the initial stages of the conflict. Just like reality, the war had complicated reasons, sensible motivations for why it came into being. Lacus can't just get up upon his soapbox and claim the war can end if people stop being afraid, because that isn't how that works. Zaft was attacked, the war was a defensive one, and the Alliance had no intention of surrendering. If Chairman Zala didn't lose his marbles and didn't decide to blow up Earth at the tail end of the series, Lacus would look like a complete, sanctimonious dipshit. Without proper, real human motivations, which have sparked far more wars than irrational fear, the conflict becomes less a tragedy and more a straw man. There isn't any nuance where there should be, thus making the war in question make no sense, which runs counter to Mobile Suit Gundam's overarching point. Some exceptions do apply. By having Kira yeet everything that gets in his way without issue, you trivialize the sacrifice and misery those impacted by the conflict face, without having to confront those he's killed. By wiping away the ambiguity associated with Kira's actions, you throw out the harsh realities the audience may be forced to face. If the faceless die faceless, their deaths hold no meaning. The audience won't be shown the tragedies of war, thus giving Seed's message no bite. And it's a bite the show desperately needed, for without understandable reasons for why people and organizations do what they do, Lacus's words seem disconnected from reality. Because they are. Instead of being a universal message we can all get behind, it comes off as sanctimonious drivel devoid of all meaning. Seed failed to grasp that bringing about an end to a war is not meant to be easy. It isn't something an idol, a twink, and 3 ships can do on their own. It takes countless lives and a lot of human suffering before the end can even be seen in the distance. What made the original Mobile Suit Gundam great was that it was a story about war, about those whose lives were ruined and taken before their time, about the heroism and barbarity of soldiers found on both sides. It showed the audience that war was a bitter, miserable experience which didn't end quickly. The point of Gundam is that ending a war is difficult, so it is up to us, all of us, to prevent it from happening. It is perhaps for this reason why I find the most egregious line in all of Seed to be at the very end, when Raoul Lacroix states he wants to rid the world of Kira, because if others learn of his existence, they'll strive to be like him. This line fails to understand that Tomino's challenge to the audience isn't to emulate one person, but rather be the best you can be. Don't let your soul be weighed down by gravity. Let go of past hatreds and seek to understand others. Ending a war isn't easy, but preventing one from happening in the first place is even harder. Though it's a terrifyingly difficult task, who knows what can be achieved if we all set out to meet it together. As unfortunate as it is, this is the point Seed fails to grasp. But having said that, guys, I've been Boofar191. I want to state before wrapping this video up, there are a few other things I wanted to talk about, but decided not to, just for the sake of time. Coordinators, spatial awareness especially versus new types is... that's a mess unto itself. I will state that, as of the time of recording this, I've watched about 10 episodes of Seed Destiny, and even though the character design and MS design are still problems I have, all around, it is a marked improvement. The conflict which occurs makes sense for why it's happening. The motivations of those involved, I understand them. It's Gundam. Let's see if it lasts. I keep hearing that it doesn't, so hippity hoppity, oh no. But having said that, guys, I've been Boofar191. I hope you've enjoyed this video. I'll see all of you next time. Goodbye.